Tales from a Time Gone By. Flashback with Seetal Iyer. Only on The Podcaster.
Come on, that has to be one of the most recognizable pieces of theme music to come out of Hindi cinema. In the history of Indian cinema, I would stretch and say, and I don't think too many people will disagree, the theme song of Dawn. And that should give you the clue of the subject of Flashback today. Welcome to the show. This is Seetal. We're going to be talking Kalyanji-Anandji. But I have to add or digress a little bit over here, because if his SoundCloud account is something to go by, then Babla, their younger brother, had something to do with the composition of that theme song as well. And speaking of Babla and Kanchan, remember that phrase? It really was a phrase in the 70s and 80s. And this was a husband and wife pair that became really popular in countries like Fiji, Suriname, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago for their chutney soca music. An example of a soca hit, I'm sure you remember this one, Arrow's Hot Hot Hot.
Ole, 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 feeling hot, hot, hot. Feeling hot, hot, hot.
And Babla and Kanchan's version of Chutney Soca, the same song. Essentially a fusion of Indian folk traditions and also African calypso. But yes, I'm guessing this whole popularity of Babla and Kanchan owes its roots in something that Kalyanji-Anandji were very, very famous for. And I suppose the younger brother might have learned the power of including the diaspora in your musical endeavors. And that is something that began with these Kalyanji-Anandji nights. And that is also where I first sort of internalized the phrase Kalyanji-Anandji. Before this, I had heard their music, but I had no idea who they were. They could have been actors for all I cared. I know this is not the right thing to say, but then I was about 9 or 10 at the time. And this is how I discovered Kalyanji-Anandji, or figured out they existed and they were people to reckon with. So the year is 1982. And there's a cassette that arrives at home, and it is Kalyanji-Anandji Nights with Amitabh Bachchan in Toronto. And Amitabh Bachchan clearly seems to be on stage performing the popular Lawaris song Mere Angne Mein. This was a staple, I think a stage staple for him. And every time he would say Jiski Bibi Choti and then call Jaya Baduri or point to her, the crowd would be in raptures all over again. It was a trick that he loved to pull out at every concert, I think. But nevertheless, I'm digressing. The phrase here was Jiski Bibi Bhengi. Completely inappropriate for this day and age. But remember, that was the 80s. And he looks to this person next to him and he decides to explain what the word really means. And this is how he chose to do it. So really through an O.P. Nayyar song from the 50s, that's how the name came to mean something to me, Kalyanji-Anandji. And again, I didn't know it at the time, but all of the songs that I really loved in a certain period of the late 70s to the early 80s were compositions by Kalyanji-Anandji. For example, Main Hoon Dawn. I didn't really care for Ye Mera Dil or any one of the other songs from the soundtrack. For me, it was always Main Hoon Dawn. That was something, outstanding as far as I was concerned. Or O Saathi Re from Muqaddar Ka Sikandar. A lot of people like Dil To Hai Dil. Pyar Zindagi Hai is also, of course, you'll remember the Princess Leia hairstyle that Rakhi had. It was hideous, but nevertheless. Or the title song, Muqaddar Ka Sikandar, written by Anjan. What lyrics? Or for that matter, even the biggest number in that album, which is, in my opinion, Salame-Ishq. For me, it was always O Saathi Re. I would weep every time the song played in the movie or the tune played, that typical tune, you know what I'm talking about, this one. Yeah, I would be in tears. And later in the 80s, Kurbani, the title song of Kurbani, not any of the other songs, interestingly, this was what caught my attention, probably because of that Mid-Eastern flavor, and that really appealed to me. And then there was Jabaz. Again, not the other more melodious songs from the track, but this one, possibly because of this, odd element. Pyar Do picturized on Rekha in Jabaz, and clearly they'd also recruited a lot of overseas dancers for the picturization of this one. Then there's a special song because my brother, was taught to sing this, I don't know why, on stage, a sad song for a little child. I have no idea, but I think he performed this in school at some point.
मेरा जीवन कोरा कागज कोरा ही रह गया.
Kora Kagaz also had an award-winning Lata Mangeshkar song, and you'll hear Anandji talk about that a little later on. And yes, I forgot to mention the most important part of Flashback. We will be pulling up an interview from the archives with Anandji. This interview I had recorded myself sometime in the mid to late 2000s. I'm pretty embarrassed because I giggled quite a lot, but Anandji has this way of putting you at ease. You'll discover, you'll hear a bit of that as the show rolls on. But yes, just because I have spoken of 70s and 80s doesn't really mean that's all there is to this music director duo. That, when it comes to duos, sits between Shankar-Jaikishan and Laxmi-Pyare. You know what I mean? Kalyanji-Anandji occupied that middle space when you look at the timeline per se, only the timeline. Anyway, I've got someone interesting to offer us that perspective on what sets Kalyanji-Anandji's music apart, because you would think maybe nothing else, because they were highly adaptable as music directors, changed their compositions to suit things like location, character, mood, and so on. But then you will discover that I am wrong when I say there is no specific Kalyanji-Anandji style. So after that very long introduction of why Kalyanji-Anandji is so personal to me and indeed were the soundtrack of my growing up years, let us hear Anandji introduce himself. It's a bit weird, when someone says, "Hi, I'm Anandji," because you're like, then you don't say. But nevertheless, he also talks about what really set the music of that time apart in his own voice. And we will discover it one more time on this show.
पहले तो सबको शुक्रिया, नमस्ते, सुनने वालों सबको मेरा नमस्कार. मैं आनंद जी बोल रहा हूँ, कल्याण आनंद जी में से आनंद जी यानी कल्याण जी भाई के छोटे भाई. रीजन ये है कि पहले तो ये है कि स्पेस जो था वो स्लो था. अब एवरीथिंग हैज बिकम सो फास्ट, इंस्टेंट सबको चाहिए, तो वो हो गया है कि फास्ट फूड जैसा हो गया है जी. उन दिनों में गाने जो बनते थे, वो गाने बनाने के लिए 1 महीना भर राइटर लिखता था, उसमें सोचता था, कहानी की सिचुएशन बनती थी, उस पे गाने बनते थे. जैसे कि छोड़ दे सारी दुनिया किसी के लिए, ये मुनाजिक नहीं आदमी के लिए जी. इस तरह के गाने जो है, फिर जैसे मैं तो एक ख्वाब हूँ, इस ख्वाब से तू प्यार न कर जी, हिमालय की अपने हाथों में हवाओं को गिरफ्तार न कर. तो ये इसमें समर्पण की जो भावना थी, वो भावनाएं जो थी वो बहुत हेल्प कर रही थी. और लिखने वाले भी, कंपटीशन भी इतना अच्छा था, पोइट्री सब चलती थी बहुत अच्छी. तो वो एक मजा हुआ काम होता था, क्योंकि सभी उसी तरह का काम करते थे उसमें.
Sometimes a voice is enough to let us time travel. Flashback with Seetal Iyer.
Now that I've got Anandji to successfully introduce himself to us, as if that was needed, let me introduce our special guest today. Now, there is a tenuous sort of a connection, but I'm going to give it a shot nevertheless. The story is that Anandji and Kalyanji were, we know the story, assistants to Hemant Kumar, and that's how the Bean music becomes part of their story, but we'll come to that later. So yes, Hemant Kumar, and music director Ravi was also his assistant at the time. And Ravi, you will remember for monster hits like Chaudhry Ka Chand, Dil Ke Arma Aansuon Mein, or that song that is so typically older people romance, "Ae Meri Zohra Jabi" from Waqt, and Chalo Ek Baar from Gumrah, beautifully written by Sahir Udhyani. Anyway, that's Ravi. So in an interview, music director Ravi had told us that at the time there was another Ravi Shankar, Pandit Ravi Shankar, in the music circles, and he had decided to drop his Shankar, that part of his name, so that he's not confused with the Pandit Ravi Shankar. So Ravi Shankar, music director, became just simply Ravi. As it turns out, I've got B Ravi Shankar joining us today, and this is really how I met him. I was doing my research for this podcast, and I came across a lot of content, but nothing quite as insightful as the posts by B Ravi Shankar. And I just, decided here's a man who's able to tell me what is distinctive about Kalyanji-Anandji's music. Because I was hard pressed to, with my untrained ear, wasn't able to tell what that difference was. So I decided, okay, let me put a comment in the post, in the blog post and see if he responds. And he did. And here he is today. So B Ravi Shankar is who we have. He's, by the way, an IT professional. He's been part of organizations like Tech Mahindra and Capgemini. He's a PG Wodehouse fan, but he is also a massive fan of Kalyanji-Anandji. So much so that apparently Anandji's son got in touch with Ravi and invited him to visit Anandji because apparently Anandji felt that nobody had done his work, the kind of justice that B Ravi Shankar had through his writings on their music. So I decided who better than him, than having been invited by Anandji himself to his house to share a cup of coffee or a meal. Anyway, thank you so much, Ravi, for being part of Flashback on Kalyanji-Anandji today. And how are you?
Thank you very much, Seetal, for giving an opportunity to talk about Kalyanji-Anandji, my favorite composer.
So tell us about your landing point. And I did play a clip sometime back to introduce people to how I came across Kalyanji-Anandji's names. I mean, that became part of my zehen, as you call it. What was yours, Ravi?
Yeah, Seetal, in the 60s and 70s, I used to listen to a lot of music on the radio. Mm-hmm. And somehow I felt that, there was a very nice blend of melody and rhythm in their songs. Mm-hmm. And that appealed to me. So I became a fan and started following their music. And I found that there's a distinct pattern to their style of composing. And I started liking those individual elements and patterns that they put into their songs. And so I followed them quite a lot. And, there have been many evenings where, I've been relaxing to Kalyanji-Anandji music. Many nights where, I slept to Kalyanji-Anandji songs. I'm really indebted to them for giving me so much of joy. Not just to me, but I'm sure to millions of their fans and music lovers all over the world. So that's how I got introduced to Kalyanji-Anandji.
Clearly, different people land with Kalyanji-Anandji through different routes. And let's figure out how Kalyanji-Anandji themselves landed in the world of films. Listen.
मेरे नाना जो थे वो रंगून में रहते थे.
अच्छा.
वो वहाँ रहने के बाद उनको म्यूजिक का थोड़ा शौक था. मगर मेरी नानी और ये लोग फोक में सब, मेरी मदर बहुत अच्छा गरबा करती थी.
अच्छा, फोक म्यूजिक.
फोक म्यूजिक.
हाँ.
वो जो करती थी आज भी नहीं हमने देखा किसी को उस तरह से वो मटका लेके टर्न होना ये होना. मगर वो गांव में जब रहते थे तो वो क्या नवरात्रि होती थी, फिर शादियां होती थी तो उस वक्त वो मेला होता था. तो ये सब कुछ था, लेकिन ये सब कुछ नॉट एज कमर्शियल और एनीथिंग, लेकिन एक जो लोक संगीत लोक भोगी जो होता है वही होता था जी. तो वो म्यूजिक डायरेक्टर होने के बाद भी हम दुकान पे बैठते थे. अच्छा. और मजा लेते थे उसका. अच्छा. क्योंकि दिस वाज द एज ऑफ स्टडी. और आजादी के पहले के लोग हैं तो क्या होता था कि आजादी के पहले बहुत छुट्टियां हो जाती थी, स्ट्राइक हो जाता था, ये हो जाता था. तो वो दुकान पे जाके बैठे. दुकान पे बैठने का फायदा ये होता था, ड्राई फ्रूट की दुकानें थी, अनाज की दुकानें थी, तो खाते रहो के सिवाय लोगों की साइकोलॉजी क्या है. एक खरीदने आने वाला आदमी अपना छोटा भी आदमी है, लेकिन उसका कॉन्फिडेंस क्या होता है, उसके तौर तरीके क्या होते हैं. तो उसके साथ एज अ बिजनेसमैन आपको कस्टमर इसे राइट करके चलना है. हाउ टू टैकल देम. डिफरेंट लैंग्वेजेस आप सीख सकते हैं, डिफरेंट लोगों की साइकोलॉजी समझ सकते हैं. ये एडवांटेज बहुत होता है.
पर आनंद जी, आप तो शाह है, तो आदमी पहचानना आपके दाएं हाथ का खेल होगा.
Is it old school disco you groove to? Or is it a ghazal that moves you? Seetal Iyer has everything covered and then some more. Flashback with Seetal Iyer, only on the Podcaster, powered by Timbre Media.
No offense meant to Shahs whatsoever, but that was Anandji talking about early days, spending time at the store and picking up things that probably informed their direction in music in a certain way. Also about the folk traditions that they grew up in. Anyway, that said, signature style, that's really what really led me to you, Ravi. So I had to ask at this point, because it's not to say that they didn't give us signature or anthem kind of music. Dawn, I've already established that. Then if you think of a patriotic song that unites this country, one song, everybody, मेरे देश की धरती.
मेरे देश की धरती सोना उगले उगले हीरे मोती, मेरे देश की धरती.
If you think Janmashtami, there is this one. If I just have to say the word wedding, band baja barat, then nothing has to play. You'll start playing this in your head. Meri Pyari Bahaniya from Sacha Jhoota.
मेरी प्यारी बहनिया बनेगी दुल्हनिया.
So not to say there wasn't a signature style, and yet when you think about it in a larger perspective, right? If you say Dum Dum Diga Diga, somehow you could get confused that that's Shankar-Jaikishan's music. Any number of the 60s songs, whether it's Bekhudi Mein Sanam from Hasina Maan Jaogi or Kabhi Raat Din from Amne Samne, these could sound like any one of their contemporaries. The music of the 70s, Zindagi Ka Safar, Jeevan Se Bhari, Pal Pal Dil Ke Paas, Vada Kar Le Sajna, you're somehow confused. R.D. Burman, Laxmi-Pyare, Kalyanji-Anandji, who is it? And yet, they stood for something, because I would be terribly wrong if I said they did not have a signature style, especially after I read some of what you had written. So tell us, what is it that, if there is a person who's setting out to explore Kalyanji-Anandji's music, what are the motifs or the special effects and things that they did in their songs that you should be looking out for?
Seetal, quite often, most of today's listeners remember Kalyanji-Anandji, based on their music for Dawn and Mukaddar Ka Sikandar, Kurbani, and so on.
Right.
But over the years, there have been distinctive patterns that I have observed in their music. Right from, the late 50s, they actually started off in 1958. They had a very good run in the 60s, especially building up to some huge successes in the later half of 60s.
Right.
So one of the hallmarks of their music has always been an equal importance given to orchestration and arrangements. For example, if you take a song from Ji Chahta Hai, Hum Chod Chale Hain is a song which is sung by Mukesh. There is a beautiful orchestration accompanying the song. If you take, for example, Mujhko Is Raat Ki Tanhai Mein. Again, that's a very sad song, but they've added a lot of attractive orchestration using trumpets and so on to enhance the beauty of the song and make the song popular from an orchestration point of view as well. You have Vada Kar Le Sajna from Haath Ki Safai. And specifically coming to instruments, there's a distinctive pattern that you can notice in all Kalyanji-Anandji songs, and that is their use of string instruments. There's a Mukesh song which goes, Mere Toote Hue Dil Se, and it is accompanied by beautiful strings. Then you have, of course, in the 70s, there are a lot of songs like Dharmatma, Tere Chehre Mein, where they used Mid-Eastern, string instruments. Plus, there's a particular style that they have in their composition. In the vocals, some of the songs have very elongated notes. There's a very popular song from Upkar, Kasme Wade Sang Ve Manade for Pran. In that song, for example, there is a Masiha. Okay, Masiha word, is elongated.
Hoga Masiha.
Or you refer to, O Saathi Re from Mukaddar Ka Sikandar. The Re gets elongated. Or there's a, Lata Mangeshkar song from Johnny Mera Naam, Babul Pyare. Pyare gets elongated. So all these, in the vocals, they elongate the note because, first of all, it adds, to the beauty of the song. It makes the song elegant. And, with a slight, what is technically called as a murki at the end, it adds a touch of, grace to the song as well. So this is one more element, which is a distinctive element of a pattern that they use. And, there's also a fourth type of pattern that I've observed. When they're playing the orchestration, they pay a lot of attention to, how the music starts and stops. So there is what I would call as, pause and start. In technical terms, some people refer to it as a third effect, in the sense that you play a music and then, you bring it to a certain level of, not exactly a crescendo, but a certain level of excitement, and you stop. and then the rest of the song or some other instrument picks up. So this is technically what is called as a third by some people. So they have used that pattern quite a lot in many songs. There is, for example, in Paris, there's a song called Tere Hoton Ke, which is actually a duet by Mukesh and Lata. Or there's another duet from Purnima called Humsafar Mere Humsafar. And one more that can come is from Kurbani. It starts off in a folk style, and then there's a stop, and then it again picks up the tempo.
हम तुम्हें चाहते हैं ऐसे.
So they're all different patterns that they have used in their composition, which makes their songs distinctive. So, I mean, as a beginner, if you see these type of songs, then you can be fairly certain that, these are Kalyanji-Anandji songs, especially if you listen to the 1960s and the 70s songs.
Clearly, I was wrong. I mean, I knew I was wrong. But you don't just get to win awards like the one that they won for Saraswati Chandra or Kora Kagas. You don't get to do that if you do not have a certain disciplined approach to your own music. You don't know what you're doing. You just bumble along because the director said so. So let's listen to Anandji talk about awards.
देखिए, एनकरेजमेंट कहीं पे भी मिलती हो ना, और वो अगर जेन्युइन मिली है, हम लोगों ने वी नेवर ट्राइड टू अचीव एनीथिंग. जो आ रहा है सहज भाव से. हमारे पिताजी बोलते सहज पके सो मीठा हो. तो ये लालचा में कहीं नहीं रहे कि ये मिल जाए कि इसके लिए कुछ करो. तो वो जो सामने से खुद ही आया है, तो उसका एक मजा अलग होता है. तो आप दुनिया के सामने तो आप कुछ कह सकते हैं कि ये हमने अचीव दिस थिंग, बट योर हार्ट विल से कि दिस इज योर स्नैच फ्रॉम समबडी. सो देखिए, पहले हमको सिने म्यूजिक डायरेक्टर एसोसिएशन ने हिमालय की गोद के लिए अवार्ड दिया था. ठीक है ना, ये किन्होंने दिया था? म्यूजिक डायरेक्टरों ने. एक नया दौर निकला था कि भाई अपने लोगों में कंपटीशन अच्छा काम होने के लिए हम ही सिलेक्ट करेंगे, और उसमें ये गाना सबने सिलेक्ट किया, हिमालय की गोद में. मैं तो एक ख्वाब हूँ. 1965 फिर 1968 में सरस्वती चंद्र का अवार्ड मिला. अब ये अवार्ड जो था, ये बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग इसलिए था कि जमाना आ गया था कलर का. सारी पिक्चरें कलर में बन रही, और जो हमारे गुजराती प्रोड्यूसर थे, उन्होंने बोला कि ये सब्जेक्ट गुजरात का है, म्यूजिक आपको ही देना होगा, और ये पिक्चर बनेगी ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट में. तो जरा रुक गए हम लोग कि भाई अब जमाना जब कलर का है तो आपको ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट में क्यों बनाना. बोले ये प्री इंडिपेंडेंस की पिक्चर है, और हमको वो डार्क पीरियड दिखाना है, और वो संस्कार दिखाने हैं, और इसमें हीरो भी नया होगा, डायरेक्टर भी नया होगा. शुरू में निम्मी जी थी, और म्यूजिक आपको देना है. आप कुछ हाँ बोलेंगे ना बोलेंगे उससे कोई मतलब नहीं. तो हम लोगों ने पिक्चर सोचा कि चलो अच्छा है कि एक रफ पिच पे काम करना है, चलो करके देखते हैं क्या होता है. और उसका मजा भी आया लोगों को, क्योंकि गुजराती टच भी रखना है, हिंदी में गाने देने हैं, भाव वही रहे कि गुजराती जो सहमी हुई कि फूल तुम्हें भेजा है खत में, ये और जो वहाँ की संस्कृति है तो लेके चलना था. तो हिंदी विजय ने भी बहुत अच्छा काम किया, और बड़ा मजा आया उसको.
चंदन सा बदन चंचल चितवन.
Sometimes a voice is enough to let us time travel. Flashback with Seetal Iyer.
Okay. Apart from the awards, there's also a very interesting aspect of their music, which is two of their songs. One is Ae Naujawan from Aprad and Ye Mera Dil from Dawn. Some of the music has been incorporated into a rap style of song, and they won an award from BMI. So that's really noteworthy. And of course, apart from the awards, there is also a recognition in Binaka Geet Mala. So right from 1965, when they had their Saheli song featured in Binaka Geet Mala, they had quite a few. 1973 was Zanjeer song, 1974 was Kora Kagas, and later on, there were many more. So there have been apart from the awards, there have been good recognition also in the form of Binaka Geet Mala toppers.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the Ae Naujawan song from Aparad, which also, by the way, was a Feroz Khan and Kalyanji-Anandji partnership, which was fairly prolific in the 80s as well. But this relationship began in the 70s with Aparad. This song, I have to tell you this, Ravi, in the WorldSpace days, we've done, Farishta was a 24-hour radio station, years of that content going out. Radio City as an FMRJ, I've done several Asha Bhosle retrospectives, Kalyanji-Anandji tributes, but not a single time have I actually played Ae Naujawan from Aparad on any one of those shows, and it's unbelievable that I have managed to go through life without drawing attention to this particular aspect. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to play that small little bit. And Don't Funk With My Heart by the Black Eyed Peas is where you see both these songs being sampled. So listen up.
No, don't funk with my heart. जवां है सब कुछ यहाँ.
I want to do another sort of a contrast over here. And this is not Kalyanji-Anandji's music at all per se. It's Hemant Kumar's music in Nagin, Mandole. And cut to a more recent time, Love Aajkal was the film. And you had this song called Twist. Listen. So what I find fascinating is that the other day I found this meme or something, I don't know what it was, but it was about typical dances for parties. So there's a 9 p.m. dance, then there's a 12 midnight kind of dance, then there's a 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. kind of dance when everybody's completely gone. And that is the Nagin dance. And this tune seems to have become part of our sense of what the snake charmers could have played back in the day as well. We seem to think that it's some folk tradition handed down orally, and then finally we've taken it and converted it. And we know that Kalyanji, as his assistant, played this tune for him on the claviolin. But interestingly, who composed that bit? You would have thought it's Hemant Da, right? But no, as it turns out, Shamanuja, another blogger with posts on, you can check out, I think, Nothing to Declare, that's what it's called. Very, very interesting articles. He decided to dig deep. And boy, did he dig deep, because he's discovered that the tune was actually composed by a Goa-born pianist by the name of Lucila Pacheco. That's what her name was. And she came up with a tune, which we now recognize as the Bean or the Nagin dance song or tune. And that was taken by Hemant Kumar for the song Mandole. And that was played by Kalyanji, who had access to this new instrument called the claviolin. Ravi, I'm curious to know, did this come up in conversation about this particular thing? Because everyone, when you talk about Kalyanji-Anandji, will talk about this piece, although they didn't really compose it at all. So tell us.
But who composed did not come up, Seetal. But he did tell me that his father actually loved reading foreign magazines at that time, and in one of those he saw this instrument, claviolin that you're referring to, and that is when he thought that he would actually get it. And it took quite a while to get that instrument to India because it had to be imported from other countries. Right. But Anandji clearly mentioned that it was his father who saw the instrument in a magazine, and then got it into India, and then Kalyanji started playing that, and of course it became very popular. Not only in Nagin, but in I think Anandji also mentioned that prior to that they did use that instrument in another film. Yeah. Plus also in Madari there's a beautiful duet which has this bean type of sound.
Right. Interesting, the kind of doors that really open once you begin on a journey like this, right? Looking for Kalyanji-Anandji, and yet you're finding people like Lucila Pacheco. I love this already. Listen anyway to what Anandji had to say about this moment in time.
इनके लिए हेमंत जी के लिए सिर्फ बीन बजाई थी, क्योंकि दैट वाज द इंस्ट्रूमेंट व्हिच वाज फर्स्ट सिंथेसाइजर इन इंडिया, जिससे कि पहली बार ये आया था। और उसमें बीन नहीं तो बज नहीं सकती। ओरिजिनल जो पुंगी होती है 4-5 नोट होते हैं, तो उसमें ये कृष्णा तो था जो ऊपर जाना जो है वो नहीं हो सकता। पर इस पिक्चर नागिन से पहले आई थी पिक्चर नाग पंचमी, उसमें गाना था, मालूम है आपको? वो नाग कहीं जा डसी हो रही मेरे पिया को बसी हो रही। चित्रगुप्त जी का म्यूजिक था इसमें, और दिलीप धोड़किया करके हमारे दोस्त हैं जो उन्होंने गुजराती गाने भी गाए हैं, आंखनो आफीणी और ये गुजराती गाने थे उनके, वो साथ में जुड़े हुए थे। तो उनको एक प्रॉब्लम आ चुका था कि भाई अभी इसमें बीन में क्रेसेंडो करना है, आगे बढ़ना वो कैसे होगा, इसमें तो हो नहीं सकता। तो उन्होंने बोला कि एक इंस्ट्रूमेंट आया उसमें देखते हैं, तो वो उसमें थोड़ा सा इधर उधर कॉम्बिनेशन करके वो किया, और वो गाना बहुत चल गया था। तो उसको देख के इन्होंने बोला, प्रोड्यूसर व्यापारी आदमी है ना, तो बोले कि ये पिक्चर कैसे काय कोई चल रही है। तो उन्होंने बोला कि बस इस पिक्चर में एक गाना है जो सांप आके उसको ये डसता है और ये करता है, तो उससे ये हो रहा है। तो बोले अगर एक गाने से ये चलता है तो ऐसा क्यों नहीं करे कि पूरी पिक्चर ही बना डाले। तो उन्होंने नागिन बना डाली। हेमंत दा का म्यूजिक था, तो शुरू में तो वो जाके उन्होंने पूछा कि भाई वो बीन चाहिए हमको, तो हम लोग उसको पुंगी बोलते थे। बोले बीन तो इसमें आती नहीं है, तो बोले कि नहीं बीन आप नहीं बजाइए। तो बोले ये कौन सी, बोले फलान पिक्चर में। अच्छा, उसको हम लोग पुंगी बोलते थे। फिर बोले कि हाँ यही चाहिए, फिर वो उसका पूरा हुआ। वो लकीली वो पिक्चर का म्यूजिक इतना हिट हो गया, और ये बीन जो ऐसी हुई कि इंडस्ट्री में एक मिशन का इतना नाम हो जाना एक दिन में, वो इत्तेफाक था, कुछ ईश्वर की कृपा थी
जी।
तो ये सब कुछ हो गया।
Sometimes a voice is enough to let us time travel. Flashback with Seetal Iyer.
Any other anecdotes, perhaps it came from Anandji himself, Ravi, that come to mind?
Yeah, this is one interesting anecdote about the song Mere Desh Ki Dharti. You know, it's been recorded in quite a few places that the whole song took about 48 hours of recording because of the huge orchestration behind it. But Anandji shared a very interesting anecdote, and he said that actually the song was not Mere Desh Ki Dharti to start with, but it was Ye Desh Ki Dharti to start with. Okay. And then Kalyanji-Anandji, had a discussion with Manoj Kumar to say that, it should come out as a more personal thing, and therefore there should be a Mere there. And then the camera angles can also focus on you and so on.
Nice. And that, can't imagine the song as Ye Desh Ki Dharti anymore. It's always Ye Desh Ki Dharti. Superb. Written by Gulshan Bagra. There is, of course, several other partnerships of this nature that Kalyanji-Anandji were known for, as in working with people who were making their debut. We'll come to that a little bit later. Here's this other question I have, right? Why Kalyanji-Anandji? Have you thought about that, Ravi, yourself? Like Husnulal Bhagatram, Shankar-Jaikishan, Laxmi-Pyare Lal, but Kalyanji-Anandji, not Kalyan Anand.
I really did not think about it, Seetal, because the name has been so embedded in my mind that, I cannot think of it as anything other than Kalyanji-Anandji. But so interestingly, there's another anecdote. We know that Kalyanji-Anandji are brothers, and they also have a younger brother, Babla, who played a very big role in their music, in the later half of 60s and 70s and so on. There are actually 4 brothers, not just the 3 of them, but there are actually 4 brothers. Mm-hmm. So that's another interesting, family anecdote shared by Anandji.
Anandji himself. Interesting. Yeah. 4 brothers, and we only know of the 2.
Of the two, and of course, Babla.
Anyway, have you also pondered this particular question of when there is a duo, a music director duo, who does what? Yeah,
in fact, when I was listening to the songs on the radio in the 60s and 70s, I was always wondering when you heard a Shankar-Jaikishan song, which song was composed by Shankar, which song was composed by Jaikishan. And I started looking for patterns. And thereafter, I started deducing that, this is a Shankar tune, this is a Jaikishan tune. Similarly, I have my own instinctive view of how Kalyanji-Anandji used to work. And Anandji also shared that, basically the director had full freedom. He would narrate a situation, and both Kalyanji could come up with a tune and Anandji could come up with a tune, and the director could choose one of the two. That is one. Or if he wanted and he felt that, for a particular situation, one of the brothers, who could come out with a better tune, he could directly approach that brother and say, for this situation, I want you to compose the tune. So the Kalyanji-Anandji, I heard that, they used to give a lot of flexibility to the directors. The directors could choose from multiple options, given by both the brothers, as well as, if they wanted, they could approach a specific brother for composing the tune.
Interesting, because you would think sometimes it's about who's better at what, right? That is what I would have imagined. Like, you're better at this particular instrument, so you do that, or you're better at this particular situation, so you do that. But you've not heard of any such.
No. I in fact asked Anandji as well. It's fairly well known that Kalyanji used to favor, some ragas, like say Charukesi. But Anandji did not have any preference for any particular raga. And I think most of Anandji's songs were instinctive. For example, the song O Sathi Re, Anandji was with his friends in a hospital in a grave situation, and that is where, the tune came to him instinctively. And for most composers, either the song comes instinctively or intuitively, or, sometimes they take a bass tune and then they work on it, in effect, crafting a tune for the director. So, in Anandji's case, quite a few of the songs came instinctively.
And I see why O Sathi Re is an instinctive kind of song, because like I was telling you, Ravi, earlier, this is a song that used to move me to tears. But I can be forgiven, I was young. I thought it was a real story. And I thought it was Amitabh Bachchan. Like you said, no, Kalyanji-Anandji is a name that is burnt into our memories. For me, it was Amitabh Bachchan. There's no PH.
Yeah.
These are the funny kind of things that happen to us when we are growing up to music. But let's listen to what Anandji had to say about this coming together and who did what, because at that time, those many years ago, I deemed it fit to ask him. आप क्या करते हैं? Listen to what he had to say.
तो हम लोग क्या करते थे कि जो डायरेक्टर आएगा वो एक सिचुएशन समझाएगा हमें
जी.
कि भाई ये ऐसी सिचुएशन है, हीरोइन इस तरह से ये है और उसने गाना गाना है, घर में है लेकिन वो लवर को अपने किस तरह से ये कर रही है. तो वो उस टाइम पे दोनों अपने अपने दिमाग से एक एक ट्यून बनाते थे. फिर वो डायरेक्टर प्रोड्यूसर जो आके बैठते थे उनमें से जिनको कन्विंसिंग लगे कि भाई ये बेटर लगता है, इससे ये बेटर लगता है,
अच्छा.
उसमें दोनों में से एक जिसकी भी ट्यून पसंद की उन्होंने
जी.
तो ही वीटो पावर हो जाता है, दूसरा उसमें सजेस्टिव हो जाता है.
अच्छा.
तो उसमें ये आसानी हो जाती है कि भाई दोनों दो दिमाग काम कर रहे हैं. हाँ. और दोनों अलग अलग कुछ कर रहे हैं.
राइट.
तो उसका एक फायदा होता था.
Is it old school disco you groove to? Or is it a ghazal that moves you? Seetal Iyer has everything covered and then some more. Flashback with Seetal Iyer. Only on the Podcaster. Powered by Timbre Media.
Throughout the interview, when I was revisiting this particular interview, I realized that everything seems to be very thought through. And that, I think, will be their biggest legacy. They didn't just do things here and now. There was always a grand, bigger plan, right? Whether it was partnering with newcomers, it's not just because they were some newcomers themselves. They were established music directors, and yet they chose to work with newbies like, at the time, Anil Ganguly, Feroz Khan, Chandra Barot himself. There was Govind Saraiya in Saraswati Chandra, and a host of others, even lyricists and singers, etc.
Yeah, in fact, one of the reasons that Anandji stated that newcomers would come to Kalyanji-Anandji is, Kalyanji-Anandji were an emerging name. They had a fairly long list of popular movies that were commercial hits, and the songs also were popular. And at that time there were stalwarts in the industry like Naushad, you have S.D. Burman, you have Madan Mohan, Shankar-Jaikishan, and so on. So if a new director comes, new director would have some ideas of how he wants to picturize a song, or how he wants a song to feel like, or how he wants a song to be composed. Now, if a new director is there and he's working with a very established, music stalwart like say Naushad or S.D. Burman or Shankar-Jaikishan, they would hesitate to ask for what they want because, the stature of Naushad and Shankar-Jaikishan was so high. So they would come to Kalyanji-Anandji, firstly because, they knew that, Kalyanji-Anandji gave a lot of popular songs and the movies were commercial hits, and they had the freedom to express what they wanted. And, people like Anandji also had multiple interests. Apart from music, he was interested in camera work and editing and so on. So he would give various suggestions. So I think this sort of a collaboration and the easygoing nature of Kalyanji-Anandji also helped the directors to feel comfortable in their presence and express what they want. And so I think it is just the nature, feeling comfortable in the presence of Kalyanji-Anandji, and also collaboratively taking ideas from them on editing, camera work, and so on, that really made all new directors come to Kalyanji-Anandji.
Yeah, and when I started out, I said, there's something sometimes very telling about how someone responds to a question. Like I said, some of these things were not just happen chance. They were thought through. And this is what Anandji himself had to say about why they chose to collaborate with newer artists. Listen up.
नहीं, वो क्या होता था कि एनी न्यू म्यूजिक डायरेक्टर यूज्ड टू कम. तो जैसे आप मेरे साथ हंस के बात कर रही हैं, ये कर रही हैं, आप अपनी स्क्रिप्ट को भूल गई हैं.
जी जी.
ठीक है. तो ये बिकमिंग वेरी फ्लुएंटली जो कुछ आ रहा है मन में वो हम बात कर रहे हैं.
जी.
तो इस तरह से जितने भी डायरेक्टर आते थे उनको क्या नया डायरेक्टर होगा उसको बेचारे को पता नहीं है, तो उसको समझाना पड़ता है. फॉर दैट यू शुड हैव नॉलेज ऑफ कैमरा, एडिटिंग, ड्रामा क्या होता है. इसका जो है वो एडवांटेज होता था. और दो आदमी के पिक्चर चल जाने के बाद सामने वाला विश्वास करने लगता है कि भाई इनके पास जो कुछ है वो करते. जैसे अनिल दा थे कोरा कागज के, वो एक सर्टन नॉर्म से लेके बैठे हुए थे कि ये फिर अभी नया डायरेक्टर था तो उस जमाने में लोग बोलते थे इसमें फाइट डाल दो, कोई बोलेगा कॉमेडी डाल दो. तो हम बोलते दादा कुछ नहीं, ये बोलते रहेंगे सब लोग, अपने को जो बनाना है वो बनाएंगे. और फिर एडिटिंग के वक्त उनको हम बोलते थे कि ये वो बोलते नहीं इसको तो मत काटो, इसको रखो. तो हम लोग थोड़ा दखलंदाजी हमारी रहती थी एडिटिंग. अच्छा. तो उसका एडवांटेज ये होता था कि फिर उनको बोला कि दादा बनना है कि नहीं, चल उड़ के घूमना है कि नहीं. तो बोले क्या बाबा क्या बोल रहे हो. तो बोला ये काटेंगे, इसको रखेंगे, इसको बढ़ाएंगे, इसको ये करेंगे. तो वो फेज में चलता था. और लकीली देखिए ना कौन कौन यहाँ से आए.
मनमोहन देसाई,
मनोज कुमार,
सुभाष घई जी, कालीचरण.
बिल्कुल. फिर अर्जुन हिंगोरानी, फिर नरेंद्र बेदी. फिर एक जो हमारा था एक वो एक ही पिक्चर की उसने, चालू मेरा नाम, तो वो हमारी एडिटिंग में हम लोग ज्यादा करते थे, तो वहाँ कैंटीन में बॉय लड़का रहता था, नाम तो मैं भूल गया उसको, क्या नाम पिक्चर में उसने दिया, तो वो उसने आके बाद में सजेशन दे हमको कि सर वो कॉफी पिलाने आएगा तो बोलेगा सर वो सीन जो है ना निकाल दे तो नहीं अच्छा लगेगा जी। तो मैं बोले तू यार चाय बना रहा है कि इसमें इंटरेस्ट ले रहा है? तो बोले नहीं मेरे को बहुत इसलिए मैं आया हूँ। तो उसको उसने नाइट स्कूल में डाल दिया उसको। अच्छा। 2-4 साल उसने पढ़ाई की। फिर एक दिन आया कि भाई मुझे पिक्चर मिली है। तो पिक्चर करते करते उस लड़के को पिक्चर मिल गई चालू मेरा नाम। अच्छा। वो पिक्चर जुबली हो गई उसकी। इत्तेफाक से वो दूसरी पिक्चर 2-3 मिली थी उसको, इतने में वो रिक्शा में कुछ तो एक्सीडेंट हो गया। ओके। तो इस तरह से नए नए लोगों को काम देने का मजा भी आता है, वो सुनते हैं, इसका मजा है। हाँ, और जैसे कमर साहब और जो पुराने भी बहुत अच्छे थे, जैसे दीवर जी थे जी, उनको ब्रेक दे के उनको ब्रेक क्या देते, एनकरेजमेंट दी। एनकरेजमेंट, राइट। अच्छा, और सिंगर जितने हैं सारे आज के, साधना सरगम, कुमार शानू, उदित नारायण, सुनिधि चौहान, अलका याग्निक जी, कमल बारोटी जी, ये सब यहाँ से ही बने हैं, क्योंकि लोगों को पता था कि भाई यहाँ जाओ तो कुछ काम बनता है। तो हम लोग उसको इनको यंग एज में ट्रेन करते थे। हाँ। और कल्याण जी का एक कहना हर वक्त रहता था जी कि हमारा कंट्रीब्यूशन इस लाइन में क्या है। तो मैं बोला भाई हम अच्छी तरह काम करते हैं, लोगों को दखल नहीं आते। बोले वो तो पैसा लेके काम करे, उसका नहीं है कंट्रीब्यूशन। उसको बोलते हैं कि भाई आपने सोसाइटी के लिए जिसके में आप काम कर रहे हैं जी, उसके लिए कुछ अच्छा काम करके जाना चाहिए। तो बोले क्या करना चाहिए? बोले हम तो म्यूजिक में है, तो म्यूजिक डायरेक्टर बनाने चाहिए हमको, सिंगर बनाने चाहिए, क्योंकि आने वाली पीढ़ी के लिए अच्छे सिंगर होंगे तो अच्छे गाने बनेंगे ना। एग्जैक्टली। तो बोले हम हैं, आज है कल नहीं होंगे। और ये तो सत्य है, इसमें कोई परमानेंट तो होता नहीं है। तो बोले ये काम अपने को करना चाहिए, अभी से बीज बोएंगे तो कुछ आगे बन के कुछ होगा जी। तो वो फिर वो बोला करिए, है इसमें कोई ऐसी बात नहीं है। तो जितने भी बच्चे ट्रेंड होते थे वो नए नए गाने सिंगर कैसे गाएंगे, क्या करेंगे, वो सीखते थे। फिर उनको फुर्सत में उनको माइक पे लेके जाते थे, आप गाओ तो कैसे गाओगी, क्या फॉल्स है, क्या है, ये है। तो इस तरह से वो हुआ।
Sometimes a voice is enough to let us time travel. Flashback with Seetal Iyer.
So that really is a study in contrast, if you ask me. So, the two brothers who could give us something like Chandan Sa Badan, or for that matter, Koi Jab Tumhara from Purab aur Paschim, could also then give you Apni To Jaise Taise from Lavaris, or, the Jabaz songs, or even that, K.A. chap that you had on Sridev. You find it difficult to believe that it's the same set of people. And it's not to say that they are the only music directors who had done something like this. People who sounded a certain way in the 50s sounded entirely different in the, 80s. Same goes for lyricists and how they wrote for different decades. But one thing about Kalyanji-Anandji that stood out for me is that they were versatile within an album, within a decade, and across decades. This versatility is not just for the sake of it. It's a nice word to use on music-based podcasts. Oh, the singer was very versatile. That actor is so versatile. But in their case, it really is the case. And what is the case that you would make, Ravi, for their versatile approach?
Yeah, that's a good point, Seetal, about being versatile. If you take a couple of their movies, Saraswati Chandra, or you take Safar. In Safar, you have this sad song, Zindagi Ka Safar. Then you have this beautiful song with a lovely sitar and flute prelude, Jeevan Se Bharit. And then you have, again, a sort of a sad song sung by Lata Mangeshkar, Hum Te Jinke Sahare. Then you have Manna Dey singing Nadiya Chale Re. So it's more of a folk sort of a boatman sort of a song. And then, of course, you have Feroz Khan singing that song, going, yeah. So you have a wide range of things, folksy type, sad songs, joyous songs, things that are very poetic and lyrical and romantic in nature. So you have the wide range. Also, across the years, whether it is from the late 50s or 60s or 70s or to early 80s, they were fairly versatile. I'll just give a few examples. In terms of singers, they worked with Hemant Kumar and Talat Mahmood in the 50s and early 60s. And then, of course, they worked a lot with Mukesh. Mukesh was one singer for whom, maximum number of songs were actually composed by Kalyanji-Anandji. And all the way through to, Suresh Vadkar, Anuradha Paudwal, Amit Kumar, and of course, Alka Yagnik. And then in terms of situations, if you just consider how versatile they were, across the years and across decades, if you take the 60s, in folk songs, there's a very nice folk song by Lata Mangeshkar in Himalay Ke Gond Mein, Kankariya Maar Ke Jagaya. And then, there is another song sung by Pran in Amitabh Bachchan movie, a Nepalese tune, Hum Bolega. And then right up to dawn, you have this folk song, Khai Ke Paan Banaras Wala.
ओ खई के पान बनारस वाला.
So, across the years, they did have a range of songs, the folk type. And even if you take, the semi-classical songs that they have composed, in the 60s, they had a nice song by Lata Mangeshkar in Bluffmaster. And then, of course, you have that award-winning Saraswati Chandra, where light classical music. And even as late as in late 70s and 80s, there is a song by Suresh Wadkar and Anuradha Paudwal called Rim Jim, from, I think the movie is called Ye Rishta Na Toote.
Rim Jim, badra barse, pyasa man tarse, pyasa man tarse.
It's all semi-classical. So they did have quite a range, across the years, right from 60s to 70s and 80s. They also had the ability to use the same raga base for different situations. And here are three songs that I will illustrate. If you take Chand Ki Diwar from Vishwas, the same raga base that was used in Chand Ki Diwar was also used in a solo song, Chale Te Saath Milkar in Hasina Maan Jayenge. The same raga base was also used in a romantic duet, Kabhi Raat Din, from Aamne Saamne. Again, to give you one more example of how versatile they were across the decades, if you take the 60s, there is this Mujhko Is Raat Mein, which is an early Dharmendra movie in the 1960s. Right from there, they excelled in sad situations and sad songs. Of course, you have the, a very popular Zindagi Ka Safar from Safar. And even in Muqaddar Ka Sikandar, in the climax, there is this Mohammad Rafi sad song, which is sung in Muqaddar Ka Sikandar. So, or even later, even with Suresh Wadkar, they had a very touching sad song. Or if you take, joyous songs, or with a touch of dancing element, of course, you have the very popular song Dum Dum Diga Diga from Chelia in the 1960s. There was a Johar Mahmood movie in which, it became very popular. In fact, I used to listen to that song on radio quite a few times. Ye do diwane milke chale hain. They sing in a joyous way about going to jail. So that is one more song. There's one more aspect I think that we should, remember about their music. See, the late 50s and the early 60s, there are a lot of these social dramas for which they scored good music. Suhagrat or Mehendi Lagi Mere Haath Mein, or, a number of social movies. And they transitioned, very seamlessly into the 70s, thanks to, a lot of the help that they got from, instrumentation and the rhythm section provided by Babla. So in 1965-66, Babla joined them. And since then, he's been their key member of their team. And in fact, his name was credited as assistant in quite a few places. And he enabled them to transition seamlessly into the 70s. When all the big stalwarts, of the 60s, were faltering because, they could not adapt to the Western style of music. Kalyanji-Anandji easily adapted the Western style of music. And, through the crime thrillers of the mid-70s and later, they were able to adapt, and they turned out, many hits for Amitabh Bachchan and, several other stars. So they were adaptable, which enabled them to be, in the limelight till the 80s. You mentioned about, the theme music of Dawn as being, something that you can remember. I think, there are several other pieces. If you listen to the background music, if you take Saraswati Chandra or Jab Jab Phool Khile, they had very pleasant and, music that was appropriate to the situation. So they paid a lot of attention to the background music. And Babla came in. In addition to Dawn, Dawn came in 1978. But in 1970, there is this, title music of Johnny Mera Naam.
Johnny Mera Naam.
Yeah, it was a big hit. It was really an iconic tune, and in fact, the tune was played throughout the movie quite a few times. And in addition, he introduced a lot of new elements in the background. So there are several firsts, in the background music that were introduced by Kalyanji-Anandji and Babla. The title music of Professor Pyarelal also was quite attractive. Dharmatma had beautiful theme music.
So yes, Kalyanji-Anandji's focus on background music, clearly something that also set them apart. And, Ravi just gave us a whole bunch of examples of that having happened. Now, here's Anandji himself talking about modern and old, the things that have changed in the time that he has spent in the film industry. Listen to him.
Extreme of anything is bad. अति सर्वत्र वर्जित है, समझे ना? अभी हमने भी गाने किए पल पल दिल के पास, वो मॉडर्न बीट में गाना है, जैसे आपने बोला कि आज तक वो चल रहा है, तो वो गानों में अंदर करंट तो इमोशंस है और बीट मॉडर्न है, ठीक है ना? तो उससे कुछ ये नहीं होता, लेकिन पूरा ही आप वो कर दो, कोई पोइट्री नहीं है, कुछ नहीं है, और एक गिमिक बना के बैठे हुए हैं। गाने तो हम भी गिमिक के करते थे, डम डम डिगा डिगा होता था, उड़ी बाबा भी होता था, लेकिन उसके साथ हम उसमें भी अ आ ई उ उ ए उड़ी बाबा। अभी आ ई का और कोई मतलब नहीं है। लोग अभी बच्चे अपने ABCD सीख गए, आ आई भूल गए, तो उनको इनडायरेक्टली याद करवाने के लिए ऑल इंडिया लेवल पे कम से कम ये तो पता चलेगा हमारी 12 खड़ी ये है, आ ई उ ए आई ओ जी। फिर वो दूसरा एक्सपेरिमेंट होता है 1 2 3, वो 1 2 3 4 14 तक ले गए, हाँ जी। तो उससे ऑल इंडिया लेवल में वो गाना समझ के वो नंबर पढ़ रहे हैं, नंबर्स भी सीख लिया लोगों ने, सीख रहे हैं जी। तो ऐसे थोड़े एक्सपेरिमेंट करते रहते हैं, तो ये फायदा होता है। हर कोई अच्छा काम करना चाहता है। ओनली प्रॉब्लम ये है कि भाई उन दिनों में जो पिक्चरें बनती हैं उसका एक ही टाइप का सब्जेक्ट हो गया है। अच्छा। हमारे जमाने में वो होता था कि भाई कहानी ये होती थी कि इंटरवल तक तो जाके लड़का लड़की शायद एक दूसरे को करीब आ सके जी, ठीक है ना जी। अब क्या होगा, अब तो आते ही लड़की पहले जंप मारती है लड़के को, तो उसके वहाँ तो दी एंड क्लाइमेक्स हो गया। और ये कोई भागवत तो है नहीं जी, है ये भी कृष्ण की शुरुआती पिक्चर की ड्रामा की वही होती है कि 8 बच्चे मर गए हैं, फादर जेल में है, और वहाँ से पूरा क्लाइमेक्स से तो स्टार्ट होती है जी जी, है जी। अभी ऐसा तो कुछ है नहीं, तो वो जो चीज सब कुछ है वो होता है। आज वो गाना पहले नहीं बनता कि या उसको मूड नहीं बनता, उसको पहले तो रिदम के साथ बना के व्हाट इज द न्यू साउंड या कमिंग अप, वो लोग सुनते हैं। और सुनने वाले जो है डिस्को वाले सब है, और जो मार्केटिंग भी है वो भी इसी तरह की है कि यंगस्टर्स के लिए। इसमें कोई ऐसा गाना आपको नहीं मिल रहा है कि जिसमें कुछ ये हो। वर्डिंग के साथ देखो तो अभी वो स्टेज वो आ गई है कि बिस्किट खाओगी, चाय पियोगी, फलाना होगा, वो होगा, चलती हो क्या फलाने, वो सब होता था पहले, लेकिन उसके आगे कुछ होता था। तो राइटर भी नए यंगस्टर्स हैं सब, दे टॉक ऑल द टाइम, उसमें चलता है, ये बात भी इंग्लिश में होती है जी, समझा रहे भी है ड्रामा। तो वो लगे ना, सी देयर इज वन गर्ल इज कमिंग फ्रॉम दैट एंड सेम टाइप, तो हर बार हो चुका है, बट द बीट विल बी समथिंग लाइक दैट, यू नो, एंड शी इज गोइंग टू वेयर सेक्सी ड्रेस। अभी सेक्स किसको बोलेंगे ये समझ में नहीं आता, सेक्सी ड्रेस किसको बोलेंगे। हमारे हिसाब से घाघरा चोली पहन के जरा पैर ऊपर होता है, हाँ, तो वो सेक्सी है, उसमें ज्यादा गिलिंग लगता है, और ये पूरे बदन के साथ तो कुछ दिखता नहीं है। अगर वो चल रहा है तो वो चल रहा है, लेकिन अल्टीमेटली जो अच्छा है वो टिकेगा, हाँ। तो ये चलते रहते हैं जी।
तुमको हो पसंद वही बात कहेंगे।
Tales from a time gone by. Flashback with Seetal Iyer. Only on The Podcaster.
You know, I don't know if you've noticed this, but he engages even the interviewer in what he's trying to express. And that has been my takeaway from that Anandji interview that I did. And it's my regret that I did not keep in touch. I had promised to do that. And much later, when another colleague had gotten in touch with him about something, he said, what happened to that other woman who interviewed me? She said she'd be in touch, and I regret it. But you live, you learn. Anyway, the other big thing that stands out for me is that Kalyanji-Anandji were not really about, composing music, collecting a paycheck and saying tata. They were about a lot more. Pay it forward. That's the phrase that really comes to mind. Through, for example, the Kalyanji-Anandji concerts, uniting the diaspora through its shared love for music and the films, supporting charity, and then, drawing in the big names so that you had the crowds over there, whether it was an Amitabh Bachchan or a Lata Mangeshkar. These people came to Kalyanji-Anandji nights wherever these were happening. And then little wonders and little stars. And what stood out for me when I asked him about this was the purpose of this. It was basically to handhold young talent through what could later become challenging circumstances in years on account of adolescent development and all of that. Listen to what Anandji had to say.
हाँ, क्योंकि ऐसा है कि बच्चों को हमारे जमाने में तो डांट पड़ती थी ना, बहुत मुश्किल से हम लोगों को इस लाइन में घुसने को मिलता था, क्योंकि सोशली तो अलाउड नहीं था, क्योंकि एक तो जैनी है तो घर में चमड़ा भी नहीं चलेगा, तबला नहीं बजा सकते, ये नहीं कर सकते, वो नहीं कर सकते। तो ये वो धीरे धीरे देखा कि भाई आजकल तो ये है कि माँ बाप अपने बच्चों को लेके बोलते हैं मेरा बेटा शाहरुख खान की तरह ये कर रहा है, कोई बोलेगा मेरी बेटी बिल्कुल ऐश्वर्या राय है, तो ये जमाना आ गया है। तो उनको एवरीबॉडी वांट्स टू डू समथिंग। अब उसके लिए होता क्या, सबको जल्दी फौरन कुछ चाहिए जी, तो वो उनको धीरे धीरे ट्रेन करके जो कुछ हो सकता है वो करते हैं। लेकिन सबसे मुश्किल काम मुझे लगा गाना गाना। हाँ, क्योंकि एज के साथ आपका नॉलेज तो बढ़ता है, लेकिन वॉइस चेंज भी होता है। चेंज जो होता है उस वक्त बड़ी दिक्कत होती है, क्योंकि 12 से 14 साल में जो भी सुनते हो और उनके बच्चे गाते हैं, तो 12 से 14 साल में लड़का हो की आवाज बदलेगी तो उसको ज्यादा तकलीफ ना दें, और कोई ये नहीं बोले कि इसको किसी ने कुछ कर दिया है, किसी ने कुछ कर दिया है। वो नेचुरल ग्रोथ है, चेंज ऑफ ग्लैंड जो है वो उस वक्त होते हैं। तो उस वक्त थोड़ा रिलैक्स करेंगे तो उनको तकलीफ नहीं होगी। 2 साल का सवाल है, उसमें वो जल्दबाजी नहीं करनी।
हाँ, उनको पुश नहीं करना चाहिए वो टाइम पे। हाँ,
नहीं, वो साइकोलॉजी सब ये बोलते हैं अच्छा गाता था आज क्या हो गया। हाँ, तो वो कंफ्यूज हो जाता है। दैट इज द टाइम ऑफ चेंजिंग दिस थिंग।
यस, ग्रोथ बेसिकली। यस। So Ravi, I'm thinking, clearly it was not just about composing music, it was bigger. It was about let's do something more, right?
I think, they had very large hearts right from the beginning. And, Anandji was mentioning that their father told them that, whatever is in your naseeb, no one else can take it away from you. So whatever they deserve, it will automatically come to them. So inherently, they were very large-hearted, and they felt that, they did not lose anything by giving much more back to the society and to the industry than what they got. And it's their nature. I think they were very jovial, and there were a lot of instances where people would relate, how Kalyanji and Anandji, would crack a joke and lighten the atmosphere. And I think one of the things that they specifically wanted to do was, when you have big stars like Lata Mangeshkar, Mohammad Rafi, they wondered, why others could not get an opportunity to learn and try to become at least a fraction of Lata Mangeshkar or Mohammad Rafi. So they went out and started grooming talent. And I think they wanted to leave behind something apart from just their songs. And I think the Little Stars and Little Wonders that they started was a great legacy they left behind. Kumar Shanu's name also, comes from Kalyanji-Anandji. He used to perform in their shows. And of course, Alka Yagnik, was trained by both of them, from her childhood days. There were several cases, and I used to read quite often in the 60s and the 70s, where, if there is any disaster in any part of the country, whether it's a flood or an earthquake or whatever, the first persons that would go and do a charity show to garner money for the victims was Kalyanji-Anandji. They would do that, and they would also go out to the army men and then conduct shows, so that they can raise their money for them for their various causes. And if you notice, one of the things that they always did was their assistant's name, the conductor's name, and the arranger's name would come in a separate card in the titles. So in the 70s, it was quite common to see assistant Babla, arranger Jaikumar Pate, conducted by Frank Fernand. It would come as a separate card in the titles, which meant that they wanted to give importance to those people and show that they had a very distinctive role to play in the music creation process. So I think they were very large-hearted from that point of view. And of course, they gave a lot back to the industry. So in that sense, they're really immortal, not just with their songs, but with the legacy that they're leaving behind.
And I'm just going to carry on, or rather take a lesson from them, and I'm going to credit all the people who've helped make this podcast possible. First of them, of course, is B Ravi Shankar, who is our expert on Kalyanji-Anandji, who has kindly agreed to join us on the podcast today. And there's also our sound designer for the podcast, who is Brian Christopher Bangera. So I am also going to credit these people for their role in giving us this podcast. How did I do, Ravi? Did I take a leaf out of the book successfully?
Yes. It came out very well, Seetal. And
no, I can't let you go like that. What's that one definitive Kalyanji-Anandji song, all-encompassing? I know it's impossible to do this for you, but one song you would like to, play, make a clip of to just give people a taste of what you really love.
Yeah, if there's one song that I would like to highlight, which may not be the normal popular song, but the one that I like very much, which again has an inbuilt rhythm into the melody, is this song, Jiske Sapne, duet by Mahendra Kapoor and Lata Mangeshkar from the movie Geet.
And Ravi, yes, I must also thank you for being part of Flashback and also sharing your love for Kalyanji-Anandji's music, your insight into their style and also the human beings that they were. And for our listeners, you can check out Ravi's writing on Evergreen Indian Film Music. That's what the title of the page is, on rsbaab.wordpress.com. Well, thanks a ton, Ravi, and I hope to catch up with you soon again.
Thanks again for inviting me and thinking of me. It's a great opportunity and a privilege to be part of a show that talks about Kalyanji-Anandji, and eternally grateful to them for their music. And I'm sure there are millions of others in the world as well. Definitely, whatever little I can do to pay tribute to their music, it's really a privilege to do so.
जिसके सपने हमें रोज आते रहे, दिल लुभाते रहे.
So here's what I'm going to do, because I ended up smiling so much and laughing quite a bit while I spoke to Anandji all those years ago. I thought, why not do that for you? Why not have you walk away from this conversation with a smile on your face as well? So here it is, Anandji talking about, guess what? No, actually, guess who? His wife. Thank you for joining us on Flashback. We'll be back soon.
अनफॉर्चुनेटली मुझे एक ही बीवी है.
वो सुन नहीं रही हैं, इसलिए आप ऐसे बोल रहे हैं.
लेकिन फॉर्चुनेट उसमें ये हुआ कि जब शादी हुई हमारी तब हमने देखी नहीं था उसको.
अच्छा.
तो वो परंपरा थी, पिताजी ने पसंद की, माँ बाप ने, और वो घूंघट में आई थी. तो उसका एडवांटेज क्या हुआ, हम लोगों की आपस में ट्यूनिंग होने में 3-4 साल लग गए. क्योंकि कैसे बात करें, घर में माँ बाप है, पिताजी है, मम्मी है, बात करना भी मुश्किल होता था. तो धीरे धीरे पहली बच्ची होने के बाद 5 साल के बाद फिर उसको लेते देते धीरे धीरे बात शुरू हुई जी. फिर भी घूंघट तो चल ही रहा है जी. ऐसे भी आपने देखा होगा कभी उसको पिक्चर में, तो उसके सर पे ये होता है, पल्लू होता है.
अच्छा.
तो उसके बाद अभी अब अब्रॉड जा रहे हैं हम लोग जी. तो साथ में वो रहती है हर वक्त, क्योंकि मैं वेजिटेरियन हूँ, वेजिटेरियन खाना चाहिए जी. ज्यादा पड़ी नहीं है, लेकिन धीरे धीरे वो पिकअप कर लिया उसने सब. अच्छा. तो मैं अपना बिजी रहता हूँ किसी के साथ, तो वो ऑपरेशन कर लेती वहाँ से सबके साथ. अच्छा. उनका नाम बताएंगे? शांताबेन. हाँ. मैं बुला भी लूंगा उसको यहाँ पे, उसकी भी आवाज सुना देंगे आपको. हाँ, जरूर. शांता, हाँ, शांताबेन आ गई हैं. गुजराती में बहन का मतलब कोई वो और नहीं होता, सिस्टर नहीं होता. गुजराती में बहन सबको ही बोलते. हेलो शांताबेन, नमस्ते जी. हम ठीक है शांताबेन. हाँ, मेरा नाम शांता है. मैं मिसेस आनंद जी हूँ. हाँ, बोलिए क्या. आनंद जी के बारे में आप कुछ बताइए. लोगों को यही लगता है हाँ कि आप शांत है और आनंद जी गर्म है, ऐसे. नहीं है तो ठंडे है. अच्छा. पर लोगों को औरतें ज्यादा गर्म यूँ लगती है कि पूरा घर का मैनेजमेंट करना पड़ता है ना. इन लोगों को तो क्या है, एक बार ऑर्डर दे दिया फिर बात खत्म हो गई. एक ही कंप्लेन है कि कभी टाइम पे खाना नहीं खाते, इसलिए मैं गर्म हो जाता. बाकी खिलाने का बहुत शौक है. जो कोई भी घर पे आया वो बिना खाए गए तो उनको मजा नहीं आता. अच्छा. थैंक यू. और आपका कोई भी फेवरेट गाना हो कल्याण-जी-आनंद जी ने जो कंपोज किया? क्या गाना है? जोनी मेरे नाम का. हाँ, बाबुल प्यारे इनका गाना पसंद है, लेकिन वैसे भूल चली बाबुल का देश पिया का घर प्यारे लगे. हाँ, ये हक जमा के बैठी हुई है.
मैं तो भूल चली बाबुल का देश, पिया का घर प्यारा लगे. मैं तो भूल चली बाबुल का देश, पिया का.
Tales from a time gone by. Flashback with Seetal Iyer. Only on The Podcaster.